Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for being with us here today. What a great privilege, and thank you for opening the forum for us today. Thank you so much. Well, time now, ladies and gentlemen, for our first panel session of the day, under the title of Tomorrow's Cities, Sustainable and Secure, where our next set of guests will discuss shaping urban areas, enhancing digital transformation, smart grid and AI, and designing human-centered public spaces. To tell us a little bit more and to do the introductions, please give a very warm welcome to your moderator for this session, Etna Trainer, Managing Director of eTrainer.
Thank you so much, Laura. Assalamu alaikum, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute delight to be back here with you. I have a wonderful panel here. We're going to be talking about the cities of the future. As you know, everything around the world is changing at such a rapid pace. So now we're going to put them to the test and see actually if our planners, if our architects, in fact, if all of the key people who look and have maybe some more say than we have sometimes in terms of what cities are like. Are they up to scratch and are they delivering what we need for the cities of the future? So let me introduce you to our wonderful panel, a very learned group here who are actually going to keep us informed. Dr. Michael Gluck is with us. He is the Vice President of Industries and Value Advisory with SAP. We're delighted to have you. Margus Tiru from Estonia, the Chief Data Officer from Posidium. Thank you so much for being with us. From Poland, she is the President of the Youth Climate Council, the Ministry of Climate Change, Katarzyna Śmietnik, lovely to see you. And Friven Lim joins us, a Director at DP Architects in Singapore, yes, but in London, around the world. So it's great to have all of you here. And indeed, this very, very important, I think a very timely discussion. I mean, we also, I think, are looking perhaps at a different time in our lives, post-pandemic, almost post-pandemic. We're almost there, I'm convinced of it. But Michael, if I can start with you, when we look at public services and we look at public services around the world, I mean, there's been a lot of change, but it's automation, it's digitalization, and really the presentation of public services, which we all need, be we urban or rural, this has changed a lot. Where do you see the biggest impact in the last couple of years?
Okay, so I think overall, good morning everyone, by the way, and thanks for having me here. Overall, every building needs a foundation, and every city needs a foundation as well. And in the past, we've been pretty good in setting this one with a number of the services around moving goods and people, moving energy and utilities and electricity that is working, but the big foundation that is now need to happen or happening in some cities already, but needs to work on is connectivity. Data will flow even more, and yeah, in the future, a lot of people will work from home. So if the data is not there, that's going to be a key enabler for a lot of cities around the world.
Again, yeah, and it's almost probably about 10 years ago, even more, a different foundation we might have been speaking about, but right now it is about really that connectivity and making sure that that is the very foundation. And it must be a joy for new builds. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. And also, I suppose, we were joking about it. It's like the data, the connectivity, and somebody said, and the Wi-Fi. If that doesn't work now, we're all in trouble. Margus, talk to us about big data, because all of that connectivity that is put in place, we would hope that what it's going to mean is a better environment for everybody. What can big data do in terms of that connectivity, in terms of introducing ultimately a better life for everybody?
I think that's the main point. As a citizen, as a resident of a city or a country, I actually deserve to have the best public service. Is it a public transportation or a city as a form of streets or anyhow? And the big data or any kind of data, this introduces the possibilities to actually plan the city the way it's supposed to be. Looking at the actual movement of people, looking at the demand of the movements, looking at the connectivity, where people are, where they want to go, how regularly they want to go, and so on. So that's something that me, as not just a data scientist, but as a resident, as a citizen, I want to have this service, and I demand this service. So that's the point.
It is so true. I mean, it really is about this is what we expect. We show up, we expect things to work, and we expect things to work in public places as well now. It's not just our own private homes that we expect the lights and the Wi-Fi and everything else to work. We expect it all around us. Katarzyna, when we look at, you know, the technological development in our homes, in our public spaces and that, it's not all equal around the world, though. It's not even all equal in every street, even in Dubai sometimes. It's very good, but talk to us in a wider scale in terms of the problem there and what we can do.
Yeah, I think that, good morning everyone as well. I think that the problem here is that, for example, here in Europe, in Middle East, in Asia, very often we develop, for example, e-governance. We have city councils that went online. We saw it during the pandemic as well, so we didn't really have to go to various institutions. We could do it at home, we could work from home, but then there's a problem that people very often don't have like basic needs in terms of equal technology actually provided. So how we can make sure that these people also know that, for example, even though we are already using e-governance, we are already using e-education, and at the same time they are not even having electricity, they are not having the Wi-Fi that you mentioned, they are not even having a phone. So how we can make sure that everything is provided in this sense? I would also like to mention, for example, very broad topic of just transition. We're also joking about it very broadly, but then how it can all be included in sense the technology is provided as well. So when we are developing our world, we also have to remember that technological development is part of the basic needs that have to be ensured, and then that we have to be aware of that, because when, for example, we are thinking about the world in general, how we can make sure that there are same or even similar opportunities in terms of education, in terms of jobs, if we, for example, in Europe, we have access to this matters already, and that there are places that really don't have this yet.
And again, I think that is so important. And places probably not too far, you know, from Dubai, just hours, I mean, not too far from anywhere. I think that's it. They are our neighbors. Frippen, as an architect, I mean, where's your, I suppose, role, responsibility when it comes to perhaps a possibly more holistic approach to actually making sure that, you know, our buildings and our environments can contribute in an urban and rural setting to a better life for the citizens and the residents?
Good question. Thank you very much, and very good morning to everyone. You see, we spend 90% of our time indoors, and so it basically translates to the literal fabric and the carcass where we spend our everyday life is the very soul of our being, right? And therefore, there's such a strong relationship between architecture, built environment, and everything that we create, even the furniture and the little objects that we design. So the very essence that design is relating to humans means that we really have to place a huge emphasis on it. And case in point, for example, when we're talking about technology, there is a difference between empowering and ensuring that technology is ever present and always working, but there is also an importance in recognizing and appreciating that there should and it's perfectly okay for times when things are not working, because then we don't get disappointed and we can really elevate ourselves in terms of expecting the unexpected. And that is life, and we're human beings. We should not behave and expect to live like robots, perhaps. That's my message.
And sometimes probably, maybe we do, or maybe we've tried to in the past. But I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, Michael, when we look at, you know, how we live, we've had to all make adjustments, and we've had to all actually change a lot of what we do in our lives. I mean, we look back, I think, on the data over the years, and everything was pointing to more people are moving to the cities, the rise of the mega cities. That was where we were looking a couple of years ago, and that was where we were headed, and that was what was going to happen. Do you think that maybe has shifted a bit, given what we've been through in the last 2 years, whereby people are actually now wanting a little bit more space, and they're moving out, and they're maybe changing? And how does that impact strategy and urban planning?
There's a big conversation around reverse migration, and that is happening between urban towards rural or urban towards more community life. And what we've seen in the pandemic is people are, there's a big trend that is going on that's around home nesting, and people, you know, like they understood that they need to stay at home longer, so they want to have some space. And that's what they're searching for. There's a trend from apartments towards villas back, and villas are typically there in communities. Now, some cities don't have that capability. If you look at Singapore, example, is difficult. But others have, and you see it specifically here in Dubai, that there are a couple of communities that are rising up, like Arabian Ranches, for example, where people move in, they enjoy the houses, and they stay in there. And that's so facilitating these communities and making sure services are basically their basic services is most important.
Friven, I'm going to bring you in on this one. You're looking here with that smile about, you know, should we all be in our little neighborhoods, and should we be happy there, or should we be out and about making sure we're crisscrossing the city?
So I think what the world has realized is that the pandemic, which has not really ended as of today, right, is that health is wealth. So the previous era of disparity between the wealthy and the not wealthy has kind of become more blurred, because the wealthy person will die, the unwealthy person will also die. But the key thing is that we have to be happy, and by being happy, I'm referring to the merger and the coalesced version of mental and physical well-being. And what we can't do is we cannot control how the virus will mutate and spread, but what we can control is whether we are physically and mentally well, and we can also contribute to each other's well-being. And therein comes the word community. So I want to correct the previous statement. Singapore doesn't have communities, so that's a bit sensitive. But Singapore has communities, but it's just that it's very small, and it's a small community. It's just a city island state, right? Yeah. So and communities can exist in various scales. And that's the beauty of what the pandemic has also taught us. And that's the emerging trend of what's happening, even in places like New York, London, and Singapore.
And again, just stay with us for a minute on that. And thanks for reminding us all that we're only here for a certain amount of time, whether we be wealthy or not. That wakes us up this morning, and we will appreciate every minute of the day and beyond. But also that concept of community. Do you find, Friven, stay with me on this one, that people are actually taking more control of their community? Are people actually moving and realizing that they can take control of their community?
I think to a certain extent, yes, but not enough, I would say. So I'm a keen advocate of basic statements like small but big. So little movements, little gestures, little details. For us architects, right? And if you go to us as designers, we would say like the little doorknob could make a huge difference to your life, you know? Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it does. Because greeting a fellow colleague or a kind gesture to your neighbor could make a huge difference to their day. And I think it's that human-centric essence that architecture and design is trying to bring back. And the pandemic taught us that that is so important, and is not the steel, glass, and the concrete, or in fact even the marble or the granite. It is the way that we use materiality, the way that we can appreciate nature, the way that we can balance our minds, and is trying to keep ourselves fit. And architecture and design can help us do that sometimes in very subtle ways.
And I want to talk about that later, because it's a novel idea, and maybe one we just haven't all thought about a little bit more. Katarzyna, when we look, and you talked about this just transition in terms of technology, but I also think the world is undergoing a transition, maybe in terms of energy, in terms of just assessing how we live. There's a lot of other things. It's, the digital transition. It's a lot of transitions. But looking at, the technology and how it can help people live better lives, where do you see that the big focus has to be in making sure that that we can sort of rise more people up to a better standard?
I think I would start with education, to be honest. So when we are saying technology, we very often forget about education. So if we know how to use the technology, how to actually improve technology as well, and how to raise awareness about technology. So how we can start with that in developing countries. So how we can make sure that countries that are still undergoing this transition from some conventional means to more technological development matters. So how we can educate them to use it wisely and also in benefit for them. And in terms of let's say, developed world, but I really don't like this the slogan, but people who already have a very well developed technology. So in this sense, how education can be shared in the means that young people know how to use technology, how to help other people. So how we can, for example, share experiences and practices, not only then in terms of technology, but also sustainable development in general, how to raise awareness on climate using technology, and how to also mobilize each other in terms of various mobilizations, also just transition in various things, but using technology that is available, because that's, in our times, I think that's the biggest benefit that we can have. So we are just a global village interconnected with each other, so how we can use it wisely.
Are you encouraged, when we look at maybe rural areas that, while they might not have, my cameraman has lost me. Oh, okay, sorry, I'm coming back to Katarzyna, so you're going to be moving back rapidly here, but you're doing a great job, thank you. But when we talk about, you look at technology, and maybe they don't have the latest high-tech, mobile connected phone, but farming areas in Africa and places like that, whereby technology is actually helping small rural farmers and bringing rural people into perhaps a wider world, how they get their goods to market, areas like that. Do you think we're doing enough there? And maybe Friven comes in on that, because I see him maybe not agreeing.
I don't think we are doing enough, because then we, of course, Africa is one place where the problem is, but also there are other continents where we think that maybe the problem doesn't exist. We think of Asia, which is, we think, oh, very developed, like the East, but then we have so many rural areas that actually are disconnected from the world that is in the internet, that can, as you said, put the goods on the market. So why we are also not discussing that in depth very often. So this is the issue of how many people are disconnected and then unable to actually develop their wealthy status, as you've mentioned. So how we can make sure that we are maybe not even on the same level of development, but also how we can make sure that everybody has this chance to be there. So if we are having rural areas, maybe it's about cooperation within the countries, but also using the experience from other countries that has undergone the transition, but also the people who had the means to do it. So how can various institutions and IGOs and also NGOs, international NGOs, can support each other in this sense, but also people. So once we are aware of this problem, we also know how to actually approach it and maybe solve it in the end. But then we have to be aware, and that's representing young people here. I think that's also very important, so that young people know that if they have access to the internet, if they can actually have their parents or colleagues put their goods on market, they are very, very lucky, because there are people who doesn't have the same opportunity.
Friven, please come in on this.
So I want to chime in here, not that I disagree, but I want to chime in here on some very basic concepts. I mean, maybe the two words of balance and appropriateness. So it's important to not have the misunderstanding that technology for technology's sake is going to be the amazing thing that we as mankind could create, right? So it's important that we must recognize that there's balance and appropriateness. So case in point, there could be some really rural areas or undeveloped parts of the world, and they are perfectly happy. But they can, their life and the way that they do things could be advanced to a better cause or become more productive through technology, but it doesn't mean that they need everything that everyone's got in the city, right? So balance and appropriateness. Let me just digress a little bit, just for 10 seconds. Let's say if you're cooking and making a salad, it doesn't mean that the most expensive ingredients will make the best salad. It doesn't mean that. So it could be very basic ingredients, and it could be the best salad or the best meal, but it's appropriateness and getting that right balance. So just to chime in.
Absolutely. Marcus, come in on this when we look at, I suppose, the challenges of technology. And indeed, when you as a data scientist, when you think of it, all of this data that's being collected, the appropriateness, absolutely, in terms of that. Marcus, privacy, safety, cybersecurity, all of that. What is appropriate out there when we look at the concept of data collection?
Well, there are actually very different principles regarding the collection of and use of the data, because we have you all know the vast amount of data in every social media data. I'm working specifically with mobile positioning data. That's basically a genome font like of your DNA of the population. The same thing we have for the movement of people. So we know the movement of every mobile phone within the country, within all countries, between countries, internationally and locally, migration, everything. And this data can be used so that the privacy is preserved. We don't need to see the individual person's movement. We need to see the bulk movement of people, how people are commuting from which place to which place. How are these changing? If you change something to the city, what happens to the movement of the people? For me, it's like a DNA of movements. So it's very specific, but this data can be connected to other data sources, social media, because it's highly quantitative data. So if you have this, it's kind of the responsibility here is to use the data. And you have to follow the principle. I was talking about the principles. So first thing, for example, necessity and proportionality. So fit for purpose. You need to use the data for the specific purpose because it's there, and but the purpose might be wider than just getting something to know. You might use the specific DNA of movement. You can use it for, planning public transportation, planning the city, understanding the changes. We are changing now the let's say, concept of our life, or how we react, how we commute, how we move is changing like every year. And you need to understand it, and you need to, as a citizen, I want the government or the people in charge to be able to plan the city the way that is, corresponds to the actual reality, not just what they're thinking. You have the data, use it.
And again, yes, Michael, come in on this too. Having that data and the power, I suppose, of the citizen in terms of what can we do to be very much an active part of that data that is out there, and how does it, come back to us in terms of being to our advantage.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to dwell on what Marcus said is the appropriateness of use. By 2023, about 40% of the population in this world will be digitally traceable. That's a huge amount of numbers, right? Like 4 out of 10 can be basically digitally traced. There's a huge responsibility to use that data in a very wise and a very appropriate way. And the most appropriate way for the cities itself is to look at the citizen experience, and basically really figuring out what do people want, and do people appropriately feel how they live in the city and how they're basically being served at. And so those are the areas I think that has very, very high importance.
Do you see the citizens having almost more of a say? You look at Dubai, you look at the feedback, our happiness index, so to speak. You look at the fact that we can give feedback on our services, on our utilities, all of that, how important, that's just one step that digitally we're enabled. But you do think we can have that around, the world? Is this the type of thing that we're seeing now is very important, and decisions are made based on the feedback that, consumers and residents and citizens?
Yeah, I think we need to live with the fact that the benefit of COVID, if you want to say there's a benefit, is that in the first 8 weeks the world has leapfrogged on the digitization about for 5 years. That's what McKinsey said on the overall development. And just in the US, for example, alone 75% of the population has been gone online and doing their transactions online, and they are used to a different way of interacting and a different way of giving their feedback or giving basically their ratings on certain areas back, right? And that can be through either different type of channel, right? Can be just like a simple portal, can be basically on Facebook, or can be basically a directed governmental portal and say, okay, I want to give some feedback back, and that's the way of how I want to make my life and my city actually better, and that's how I want to be like more happy about it. So that is a big thing, and we need to see that the citizens are awakening on that one. It's there.
Now, Frivon, you're a big advocate, I can feel, of a bit more community and people talking to each other, not me necessarily sending you a text if I'm upstairs in my building to ask you how your day is. You'd like me to come downstairs maybe and talk to you. Is that what we need to do more of?
Yeah. So what I think is really fascinating is that the data revolution, or the way we've advanced the technology nowadays, is that we can really use we know, like what we're describing, we know what's going on and what's going to happen, even in terms of prediction. But the most powerful way that data can bring us to is to elevate the humankind, dare I say. Because, and I think it would be a mistake to think of data as a means of an end in terms of pushing economy, making money, but actually data is going to elevate mankind to a different place. And I'm coming back to your question, which is how then is that going to be purposeful and meaningful? So it would be wrong and it would be very careless of us if we end up deploying technology and getting ourselves more lazy and more inactive and dying younger, right? So,
Doesn't help,
so
yeah.
technology, we should be smart and we should be using technology so that we become healthier and happier. So the very essence of us as human beings is to be happy. If you think about it, because I've realized that if you were to ask any single parent and you say that if there's only one thing that you can give your child, only one thing, the most principal and the most fundamental thing and the answer that the parent will say is, I just want my child to be happy, right? Not to be wealthy. And therefore, in architecture and in design, in buildings and in environment, we got to create spaces where actually it subtly nudges people to become active, to become caring, to become sociable, to recognize that the fellow colleagues or even the strangers that they've never spoken to is another person who wants to be happy. And in so doing, when you make someone happy, you actually become happy as well. It's not a net zero kind of game. It's actually a plus and plus game. So I think that's the fascinating thing, and that's the way that we can use technology, and we should use technology in that way.
Michael, come in on this. I mean, we look at, a company like SAP, and you want us all connected. But again, just taking up in terms of what Friven is talking about, how can we be happily connected?
Look, I think the issue or the element about health
Yes.
comes very, very close to the sustainability topic. I know that's far, but the biggest issue that we actually at the moment having, and that's, at the moment also like COP26 is running, is the sustainability angle. And if we want our kids to be healthy, not wealthy, but basically healthy, we need to basically preserve the planet. That's the number one single most problem. And so the sustainability, that's where then data comes back in, right? I mean, we can't manage what we cannot measure. We are using, or we are spending a lot of effort in actually measuring our sustainability footprint, meaning CO2 footprint. And so through solutions or through data, what we are doing across many companies, so which is coming now into a lot of the companies is measuring CO2 footprint in stages 1 to 3, basically like what you directly influence, but also like what you scope 1 and scope 3, what you directly produce and what you indirectly influence. And only then we can basically take better decisions as business holders in terms of figuring out, do I go for the lowest price, or do I, for example, go for a combination out of acceptable price and acceptable sustainable footprint. And that's where basically then data comes in that make actually our life better.
Now, Marcus, one area I wanted to talk, maybe, Marcus, if I can talk to you and Katarzyna on this before we'll wrap up. I know the time is not on our side, and you've warned us, Friven, that time generally is not on our side. So, but transportation, when we look at the connectivity of a city and how it helps us in terms of moving around a city, moving from rural to urban area as well, Marcus, how important is it that that connectivity is there? And how does data actually help move us around in a more efficient and in a better way?
Well, I guess it boils down to whether we know for a fact how many people actually move from some rural area into the city, and how to actually act upon that. If you don't know how many people by a fact, or even like, is it 10,000, is it 100,000?
But when we look at congestion in the city and all of that as well, how does data help us? Yeah.
It's you understand, if you understand based on the facts that is it a number of people or whatever, or the geographical location where did they come from, if you understand that, you can plan that. And I don't have to sit in my car alone in a traffic jam if the, let's say, authority will plan a very comfortable way for me to use public transportation. The comfortable, this is the key word for the planning part, but they have to assume that, there's no point in building public transportation network if nobody uses that, because it's uncomfortable, because it follows the routes which nobody uses, nobody wants to drive there.
And this is, absolutely essential. And if any of you came here on the metro, you will know that it is the best and quickest way to get to Expo 2020. It's again, and this was very much at the foundation of what was put in place here, I think, as well. And, you know, you get off the metro and you're here. I mean, how exciting is that? But Katarzyna just talked to me about the importance of transportation when we're looking at development of a city.
Yes, so we've, for example, seen the development of car sharing, carpooling, Uber driving, and also the question is if it stay with us and what's the future actually. And I was
You know, I'm putting you on the spot as the youngest person on our panel here, so.
Yeah, and that's why I think like what's the actually future of that? And I would risk saying that it depends on climate commitments of young people. So if current youth climate activists who say, okay, we should use public transport, we should leave cars at home or not even buy a car or sell a car, whether when they become young adults, if they will still keep these commitments and if they will be able to adjust their lifestyle to it. We've seen a new approach of not having driving lessons, of not actually buying a car among young people in many countries all over the world. But then there is an issue of people very often in the countries called developed countries. So we can actually have that because public transport is there. And as you mentioned, the metro and various other means how to get to different venues and to various places that we need to go. But there are so many places, not only in rural areas, but if people would like to go to school, to work, to even have the social life that we are discussing, how we can make sure that they can do it without a car. Also in rural areas, how we can make sure that if somebody has to come to urban region, has to come to the city or to some municipalities, how they can actually go there without using the private car. And in this sense, I would say that we actually should develop public transport, but then it's also about development and how sustainable development, and one of the goals is actually like development of the cities, of course, and it includes transportation and how it can be adjusted, but then the issue is how we can make equal in the world. So again, we are coming back to the question of equality and equal development of the means that we are having. So it's very difficult, but I think that youth is actually treating this new means, so data in terms of transport, so Uber, Bolt and Taxify, as a new era of public transport.
And it is, I think, about also, you know, it's a huge responsibility on the planners, on, you know, the data scientists and everybody when they're looking at cities. There is that responsibility to make sure that people can actually take advantage and live extremely well in these wonderful buildings and streets and take advantage of the great infrastructure that's there and the connectivity. We're going to have to start wrapping up. I need some words of wisdom from all of you in terms of what do we do now? How can we make it better? This is absolutely essential. I think without a doubt, there's a lot of elements here that are looking at positioning a good city, a better life for us. But Michael, talk to us in terms of what do we need to be doing now to make sure that all of us can live a better life when it comes to urban and rural development?
I think there are probably three words, which is like, you know, connectivity, sustainability and simplicity. Right? Connectivity for all the governmental stakeholders to make sure that connectedness is happening and connectivity is there. And that's going to be the competitive reason number one in the future. Sustainability, all business owners need to take a stance in the 2030, 2035 goals, not in the 2050 goals, 2035 goals actually. And last, simplicity, maybe also community, right? Do something good, just one thing every day.
Indeed, and simplicity, maybe we overthink things too much, that actually, when it comes back down to basics, we're probably, you know, we find a lot of clarity within that. Margus, talk to us in terms of all of this great data. How can it make our lives better?
It will make it, but I think it's, I have this slogan basically, use data responsibly. It's like drinking responsibly, but use data responsibly. And from two aspects. First of all, use the data. It's almost criminal not to use like, say, traditional methods which were used in the 70s to apply to the current new world, modern world, when you actually have abundance of data for everything. And the second one is use it responsibly. That's the same of the purpose, the privacy protection, which is very important. So use the data responsibly.
Yeah, because it can really inform how we live, and I think we all have access to it now, whereby years ago it was maybe only people like yourself who had access.
Only in Estonia. Now it's okay everywhere.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Only in Estonia they had access to data back in the day. Now everybody has it, and we should know how to use it. Katarzyna, again, hope for the future and a better life for us all.
Yeah, I would say promote inclusion. How we can include various groups. So not only young people, but also, for example, elderly. So how we can make cities adjusted to the needs of the citizens, because it's not about, of course, it is also about big businesses working in the city, but then it's also about people living there, and then make the city adjusted to pedestrians. So we are seeing that, for example, here in Dubai, it's very difficult to be a pedestrian here. So how we can
Apart from Expo, come on.
Yeah,
now.
here.
You just haven't been here long enough. We have figured out all the pedestrian routes in this city, and there are lots of them. So you need to spend more time with us.
Yeah. So I would promote inclusion and a pedestrian city.
Yeah, we're beginning to see a lot more lovely pedestrian areas. You need to go down City Walk, come to the marina, all of these areas. Don't worry, we'll keep her the next time in town and show her around. Friven, I'm leaving you the final word in bringing all of this together. Where do we need to be in terms of when we look at urban and rural development, and how do we live all a better life? Because you have told us it's a little more limited than we might have thought about earlier.
So no pressure, eh? You did promise us that we will each get 60 seconds, right?
It's all yours. In
All right. So that segues very
fact,
well
they're
to...
giving us a little bit more time.
Okay. That segues very well to my two words. Perhaps my two words would be walk today. So walk today. So walk, I don't mean literally walk. Well, it could be, because I'm a keen advocate to battle inactivity, which is the fourth killer in the world today. But I mean walk the talk. So a lot of us talk, and it's okay to talk, because it's important for us to communicate and have all the disciplines to come together and coalesce all our knowledge and find solutions. But we need to walk the talk, because this might be a personal opinion, but we do a lot of talking, but in my opinion, I don't think there's enough walking. We need to walk the talk. And today, because, take the climate, the climate problem. We've been talking for a long time, but we've been talking for a long time and the actions are not coming forth. We're taking very little action. And by the time we take action, we're almost kind of, too late. And at any single moment, we're saying, oh, perhaps it's a little bit too late. But no, it's too late, but you have to act today, right? And today is important also because every single one of us, right down, from the policymakers to the individual, every single small action can count. Small but big. It could be a small action, but a small action by everyone can accumulate. So you don't have to be a millionaire to give a contribution and make someone else's life better. A small action could mean the world to someone else, and your small little contribution to the built environment, to technology, could be a huge advancement or could be a huge trigger to a really big thing. But the key thing is walk the talk and do it today.
I like that. It's that urgency that we all need to look at every day of our lives, really, and see what we can do today, and the fact that we can all make a difference, I think, yes. If we have 1 million people doing one small thing, that's a huge achievement. I want to thank my panel. I think I love all of your contributions, and you are all taking actions, and I think we just need to speed that up, and collectively we probably all need to do more, and we need to make sure that we are bringing everybody. We can't leave anybody behind in the transition that is our technology transition, the transition that is the energy transition. And I think there's also a social awareness transition going on at the moment in terms of how people live and how people move. So I like Marcus very much about using that data. We all have access to it. Use it better. Make sure that it makes our lives better. Make sure that everybody has a place, and perhaps a higher place, in a just transition of technology, of energy, of life. And again, keep it connected, keep it sustainable, and keep it simple. Yes, yes, yes. There's so much we actually can do if we don't overthink it. So thank you so much. It's a great way to start off urban and rural sustainability when we look at development in terms of what we have to do. And again, a big thanks to the Chamber of Commerce here in Dubai to make sure that we're all brought together to look at this very, very important topic. So we're delighted to be with you. So Michael, thank you so much. Margus, also Katarzyna and Friven, thank you so much. And to our dear audience, thank you. I hope you've been engaged, informed, educated and inspired. That's what we hope to do, and get you thinking about what you need to be doing for the rest of the day and for the rest of the week. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks. I'm going to hand back to Laura. I think she is nearby. Thank you again. Laura.